Welcome to my review of the Tin Hifi T5. As you can see here, as a full disclaimer, this was sent out to me by Linsol. I was not paid for this video, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own, as per usual. And yeah, let's just get straight into the video. So this is all you get really. White box, just says the brand Tin Hifi T5, obviously the latest model. See what you get. Leather pouch, I'll show you in a bit. So some documentation, Twitter and Facebook. Guidelines, burning process, product features, and there we go, the actual parameters or basic specs. So it's a 10mm driver. It uses a DOC, so it's a variant of like the carbon, the carbon kind of drivers, DOC. The actual shell of this, which I'll show you in a second, is actually a titanium shell. It is really quite a nice build, but obviously I'll show you that in a bit. So just 10Hz to 20 kHz, 48 ohm impedance, so it is a little bit harder to drive. It wasn't too bad or anything like that, just a little bit harder than technically normal earphones. Gold plated connector, 3.5 cable, which I'll show you in a bit as well. Uses a 4-core oxygen-free copper cable, and the colour is actually in titanium empty grey. It's just like a grey kind of colour. So this is what they actually like. In real life, they're slightly lighter. On the camera, it looks nearly black, but in reality, they are slightly more grey in relative. So deep 2-pin connection. I'm glad they've gone to 2-pin, but bear in mind if you've got aftermarket cables, if you want to use a balanced cable, for example, you have to make sure that it fits in there. Obviously, nozzle, lip to keep it on. There is some replacement grills, is probably the best way to describe it, in the case. I'll show you in a bit. And yeah, that's it. LR, that one obviously says L. A little bit of weight, kind of thick. These are some thick boys, so they're quite wide considering it's just a single DD. I have no idea what they look like inside, but this is a premium kind of experience. Obviously you can tell from the price. So that's the pouch. It is a leather, Tin Hifi. So you get 1 pair of foams, 6 of the grills, and that's it. In here would have been the cable, but obviously I'll show you that in the next clip. And that's it. And obviously that was used to keep the cable kind of tidy. Yeah, nice, quite a nice case. And now in the next clip I'll show you the actual cable. So this is the cable that comes with it. Basically this kind of grey matches the actual shells. It's a straight 3.5. I prefer right angled. Keeps it more not secure in case something happens. It's probably less, it covers less space, plus in case anything gets damaged. But anyway, 3.5 cable, strain relief. It's a 4-core cable. It's quite subtle and supple, so it works quite well really. Then I think you only change this if you personally want a balanced cable, if you want to go down that route. There's the tin kind of motto, chin slider, which is not very effective, but for me that doesn't really matter. To the ends, I like that they're colour coded, keeps it really simple. Obviously R as well, but just as a quick glance you can see red is obviously the right one. Really soft kind of guide how it's made. Quite a nice cable. I don't see any reason to change it unless you want to go for a a balanced cable, but yeah, looks fine. Now on to the actual earphones, which is what you're here for. Before I nearly forgot, this is actually hidden beneath the actual earbuds. So you get basically tweezers. You also use this to clean if you have to. So tweezers, this, a apart from the memory foams, the pair, you got basically 2 pairs of silicone tips. If I can get one out. So these are a small bore, as you can see. Obviously small, medium, large. If I can get one of these out. So yeah, a wider bore. So for example, I preferred it with a wider bore. When I used it with the thinner bore, it sounds a little thin in parts. It sounds a little bit off. But that's just from my experience. You might have better luck with the smaller bore. But I used my testing. I actually did use the larger bore. And yeah, now actually on to the review. This is how it looks like with the actual cable fitted. As you can see, it's quite deep insertion, so that's what it looks like with the cable on. These for me fitted well, but I'll describe that in a second. That's just how it looks with the cable. See, quite thick. They're not the lightest, but they're not ultimately kind of that heavy. So what are these actually like? So this is what it looks like with the tips on. Fit and comfort, I'll get into that. Fit and comfort on these I thought was actually really good. Considering they're quite thick, I personally had no issues at all with sound, and they did isolate for me pretty good, because there's one vent. You can see that. There's another one here. But yeah, I had no issues with the vacuum effect, nothing like that, but comfort, isolation, and the actual fit on these is really good. As you can see, they're quite thick, so they do go in quite a bit. So they're from there to here, but yeah, no issues. Sound, obviously, which is why you are here. Basically not what I was expected. They're a little bit harder to power, so make sure you have to bear that in mind. Like your headphone out is good enough, but they're a little bit harder to power, but not too bad. Sound. These do have an elevated low end. So if you try the Tin T2, the originals, Tin T2s, these are nothing like that. These are going up towards, I wouldn't say them bass head level earphones, but if there's any more, there probably would be. That includes mid bass and sub bass. For electronic music, these is actually pretty good, and these pumped more than I expected. They can take a lot of volume as well. They can take power. If you like your music loud, they can do this well. Obviously, I don't recommend that, because obviously you have to protect your hearing. But low frequencies, these actually was more than I expected. And if you don't like it, if it's too much, you can always EQ it back. But yeah, for electronic music, and if you do like genres which appreciate an increased low end, these are actually quite good. In some parts it can be a little bit much, but I think they've got some good slam, is probably the best way to describe it. It's a slam you don't get if you have like balanced armatures for low end. That's the benefit of a dynamic driver. But yeah, for low frequencies they are elevated. I thought this perfectly fine. It does bleed into the lower mids a little bit, also bear that in mind. Yeah, mids. So mids on these is actually I was quite happy with. Again, it does have elevated upper mids, so female vocals are typically more forward than male vocals. Male vocals at times can sound a little thin, just because of how the low end on the upper mids is elevated. But again, if you listen to singers which are male and kind of deeper voice, you'll probably notice the sound a little bit more distant, and obviously female voices typically are more forward. But again, they was in the threshold of not being shouty in the upper mids. If they kept going, then they obviously would be, but upper mids was fine. Obviously it is elevated and is obvious, but if you do like your female singers are really forward, they're not overdone, which is not too bad at all. The biggest deal with these is probably the treble section. Now it does have an elevated treble, and there's a couple of peaks in there as well, which you can hear. On certain tracks, it just depends obviously what you're listening to or what you're using these for. Because not everybody uses IEMs for music. There is mild sibilance, I think it's around the 5k, and I think there's a peak a little bit further up and one a little slightly below. So the peaks makes things a little bit harsh for split seconds, but it depends on what you're actually listening to them for. But yeah, mild sibilance, but then again, always check that your source is of high quality as well, because some people blame things that are actually in the music and not the earbuds themselves. You have to bear that in mind. But yeah, it does have elevated bits you have to bear in mind to what you're listening to. But for what I tested them for, those peaks didn't really bother me. But they might bother other people, so you have to... your mileage may vary, but the treble obviously is elevated. So the closest tin I have to these is the Tin T2 Plus. Obviously, that's much cheaper than these in relation, but the Tin T2 Plus are more mild tuning, so these are brighter sounding than the Tin T2s. On a graph, they share similar low end, but I think they seem to hit harder with the low frequency. But that's just from my testing. But yeah, bear in mind these are kind of a big V shape, so they've got elevated low end and they've got elevated treble. So the mids to lower mids are pushed back, so you have to bear that in mind. But yeah, the treble peaks didn't really bother me. You can see that them there, but it didn't really affect me too much. But obviously, people are treble sensitive, might not like these, so you have to bear that in mind. But overall, kind of sound signature, I actually did like them. A few people don't like these, like they're saying like how they're priced, but I think overall they are actually quite a competent single dynamic driver. Also, this is actually a titanium shell. You can see Tin Hifi went for like a premium kind of deal, kind of presentation with these, and obviously they was happy with the tuning to put into production, and obviously here we are. These obviously are not like a pre-production or a test sample. This is obviously a production unit, but overall I'm quite happy with these. Obviously these are a bit more pricey than the rest of their lineup, still cheaper than their planar offerings, but I think overall they're quite competent. If you feed them a decent source, obviously decent music files, these actually are. I was quite happy. I think they're quite good. I think they did a good job. They probably could do with a little bit more refinement. Like those peaks, like I said, might bother some people. To me, not really a big deal, really. You can also EQ if you want to as well, but yeah, I was quite happy with them. The increased low end, I don't mind that at all. The actual texture of it could be a little bit better, but again, I think this is the first driver that uses the DOC kind of technology, kind of diaphragm. So as a first variant of a driver, I think it's pretty good. And yeah, I think I've explained quite a bit, so on to the conclusion. So my conclusion of my review of the Tin Hifi T5s, as you can see here, really nice kind of premium kind of feel by design. Obviously that's what they wanted, like with the leather case. Obviously this is more expensive than the other lineup. And I've also, unfortunately, I've only tried the Tin T2 model and the Tin T2 Plus. I'd love to see how these would perform against the T4, but unfortunately I don't have one. But yeah, overall I think these are actually quite competent, but they are not perfect. They could do with a little bit more refinement of the driver, is probably the best way to describe it. Some people have moaned that these are kind of mediocre or a bit meh, but I don't think that. I think you just need to feed it a good source. Yeah, and just enjoy the music. But yeah, a little bit more refinement, I think, with the driving, with the tuning. These would have been really, really good. But yeah, I still think on the whole, they are actually quite competent. But these are probably not tuned to how people wanted them to be, is another thing you have to bear in mind. Obviously the tuning is a bit different. And yeah, I like these. They're not bad, but I don't think they would be for everyone. And that's my review. So thanks for watching, everyone, and take care.